So today I would like to give a introduction to the emergence of Ottoman Turkish. This is the language I'm most familiar with and most comfortable with, and I will be discussing its emergence in around the early 14th century up to the 16th century. Ottoman Turkish was one of the dominant kind of classical literary languages in the Islamic world for many centuries, along with Persian and Arabic, of course. But the kind of reforms made to the modern Turkish language starting in the late 1920s with the Republic of Turkey have kind of obfuscated some of the continuity between the two languages, and the Ottoman language is quite a bit different from the contemporary spoken and written language in Turkey. So with that, I'd like to discuss where it comes from. So Ottoman, what would become the Ottoman language, is just the Anatolian Turkish language spoken in medieval Anatolia. But it was not really elevated to a literary language. There are examples of literature in Turkish, poetry, and that sort of thing from the medieval period. And going back even further and further east, you have people like Kāšģarī in his Divani Lugat al-Turk, which discusses the Turkic language and people, but that was a work in Arabic. And that dates from the late 11th century. But the dominant literary language in the Seljuk Empire and in post-Seljuk Anatolia is Persian. Now, that's had been the case in all of these Turco-Mongol Khanates for pretty consistently. And obviously that doesn't mean that no one was speaking or using Turkic, but in terms of government administration and language for literature, it is Persian is the preferred expression, and of course, religious texts continue to be produced in Arabic, but Turkic is not really seen as a premier literary language. That begins to change with the emergence of the Ottomans in the 14th century. And although Persian is still used, the Ottomans seem to have adopted or taken to writing in Turkish from a fairly early period. And the earliest example of an Ottoman historical text is Aḥmedī's History of the Ottoman Dynasty, which dates from the mid 14th century or around the 1330s. And this is a versified history, and it is written in Turkish. Now, typically, if you wanted to write something that was seen as academic, let's say, in this period, you would write in Persian, but Aḥmedī writes in Turkish. And I'll read a little bit of this. I would say probably this is not terribly complex Ottoman, and maybe even intelligible for maybe 80-90% to a modern Turkish speaker, but I'll go ahead and read some of it. Bir gün ul Sultan Alauddin Said şordun olur hal-i gazi vu şehid bildi an kim gazaki iş olur gazi olanın haşri bir teşviş olur gazi olan hak dinindür aleti, lacerem hoş olasıdır haleti, gazi olan tagrinun feraşidir şirk, çirkinden bu yeri arıdır, gazi olan hak kılıçdır yakın, gazi olur puşt upena-i elhidin, Anniki ola Tanrı yolunda şehit oldu sanma kim diridir olsaydı. Hak katında rızk içindendir. Onlar ölmediler belki zindedir. Onlar pes heves etti ki ide ol bir cihad ola kim gazi oralar ad leşkerini cem edip girdi yola gündüz alp Ertuğrul anunla bile dahi gök alp Oğuz'dan çok kişi olmuştu. O yolda anun yoldaşı Konya'dan çün geldi sultan yuhine kattına geldi hayalık yüküne baylara yazaz ikram elledi. So it's still fitting in the kind of Persian syntax. This follows kind of Persian rules of poetry composition, but it is a Turkic work, and I think that's pretty important. And as the Ottoman Sultanate expands and grows over time, which was of course not a predetermined outcome, it is gradually the consensus emerges that Turkish is to be the dominant literary language. Now, this takes a long time, and it doesn't mean Persian or Arabic, for that matter, ever disappear. They're still used, but it's the Ottoman Turkish language that becomes dominant and is the one that is used by intellectuals and, of course, the state to write all of the documentation. All government documents in the Ottoman Empire are written in Turkish. And this consensus to transition to Ottoman, like I said, it takes some time, but it is a sort of conscious choice. One of the main moments where it becomes stronger is in the late 15th century. So this is about 100 years after, almost over 100 years after Aḥmedī is writing this text. You have, this is after, of course, the conquest of Constantinople in 1453, and after Mehmed the Conqueror's reign, and during the reign of Bayezid II, there's a lot of writing of historical works. There's a number of reasons for this. I could probably turn this into its own video because there's been a lot of scholarship on this, but it's during this period of Bayezid II when you get a lot of the writing about the early Ottoman dynasty, the foundations of it, and this is where some of our very early sources date from for the Ottomans. So they're kind of secondary sources in a way, and that they were written much later after the fact, but they're the earliest sort of we can get other than Aḥmedī's Dastan. And another kind of point of departure from the Persian dominance that had taken place in medieval in the medieval kind of Turkic world was that Ottoman intellectuals and writers, and I should also mention a lot of these intellectuals were government officials as well. So they weren't just, kind of purely academics like we would think of today. But anyway, the compilers of biographical dictionaries that memorialize poets and other authors begin to exclude, and this is starting like in the 16th century. So we have Bayezid II in the late 15th century, and then it's Selim II, the Sultan, at the beginning of the 16th century. And then by the time you get to this early 16th century with Selim I and then Suleiman the Magnificent, the authors of the biographical dictionaries start to exclude the Persian authors that were in the Ottoman Empire, and especially after the kind of collapse of the Timurids, which it's not an all overnight collapse, but the gradual disintegration of the Timurid Empire. You have emigres from Iran that are mostly Persians, writing in Persian, that come to Iran, or come to the Ottoman Empire, I should say, and start to write in Persian. But these people are kind of gradually written out of the story because they're not writing in Turkish. And there's even some texts that say this sort of in this way, that, well, they're writing in Persian and we're doing Turkish, and we don't, that's Persian, we don't want to do that anymore, kind of. To put it very simply, that's kind of their attitude for at least one of these authors, and I think that it's probably representative of people. And then when the Ottoman Turkish language really comes into its own in terms of output and its own kind of vision, not just linguistically but also kind of intellectually, as in the 16th century during Suleiman's reign, but also after, even during the period in the late 16th century when things get pretty bad for the empire. This is when you have actually a lot of significant literary production, and the language kind of has changed a little bit by the 16th century. So if we look at, for example, that's Aḥmedī. So if we look at, for example, this is just a selection from Gelibolulu, Mustafa Ali's Essence of History. It's a little more complex. This is obviously a prose text, but Mustafa Ali is said to be the kind of master of Ottoman prose, especially among the early modern period. And the kind of forms, I should say, are still heavily influenced by the old Persian tradition, the Insha tradition. And you have manuals before the Ottomans and especially during the Ottoman Empire about correct composition of documents and other things. This is, what Insha is, essentially rules of writing prose or rhetoric, and but in the Ottoman case, it's using Turkish, obviously. So it's taking those rules and applying it to a new language. So I'll read from this text as well, just so you can get an idea of what it sounds like. Mufarakati Osman Pasha is Veziri Kishvergusha. Sinan Pasha ya Veziri ki fi nefsil emir vizri kesir bir mushiri tariki zamir idi. Osman Pasha ya Tilirun yüzine gulup sahte arzi hulus edip ağzından sakizin çakıp bir söyledi Badihu. Nedir ki bu Mustafa Paşalıdır, bana yar olmaz ve benim gönlüm hergiz bunun hulusuna itminan bulmaz, dedi. Ve ayet-i Yemen'den azli hükmini yazıp gönderdi. Vaktaki o şeci rüzgar vakifi mazmun tomar oldu. Ferag ibal il meketullah tarafına torgildi badal azıl az katıl menvisi iduyin bilop kalaminni lisanı getirdi kendi kulçayı kızlarıyla tinabi orban miyanından şiir garan ve hizebrani merdum sitan gibi guzaran o hiramam olup Mekke şehrine çıktı. So even if you don't understand that, you can kind of, hopefully I was able to get the kind of rhyme across. And this is another point where the Ottoman authors become very sophisticated as not only writing in their own language, but being able to write in this very stylized, rhyming prose way. And this is kind of the high watermark of 16th century Ottoman prose writing. And Mustafa Ali has many, many other works that are quite interesting. But in the 17th century, things start to, the language becomes a little more simplified, not to a great degree, but enough that it's a sign that by the 17th century, you have a kind of uptick in literacy and more people are reading or at least accessing literature. So it's sometimes kind of deceptive to talk about literacy because people could read texts like this, or maybe not like Mustafa Ali, but other more popular works, either through oratory or, primarily through oratory, people reading to them, or someone reading the text and kind of communicating it to others, that sort of thing. And so because of that, the language becomes a little more simplified, but you do have in the 16th century narratives that are written by, or texts that are written by people that, kind of not an elite background. Many of them don't survive, but the ones that do, they're written in a more simplified kind of syntax, not as versified or, with not as much rhyme necessarily. So I guess to conclude this video, why did the Ottomans emerge? Why did Ottoman Turkish become so strong? And I think we can see it's a case of both sort of organic developments, just that this was the kind of accessible language to people that they felt they could write in, but also we see the construction of kind of a literary program or agenda, not in a nefarious way, but there was a conscious choice by Ottoman authors to decide to use Turkish. They certainly could have used Persian. As I've said a few times in this, that was the premier language, even among Turkic dynasties. It was the use of Persian. They could have done that, but they decided to chart their own course, and I think they created a very layered language in that Ottoman uses Turkish grammar, a lot of Turkish vocabulary, but incorporates Persian and Arabic as well. So I think kind of like English, the way we have both words derived from Latin and also German languages, it kind of can give us a range of expression in English. I think Ottoman has a similar depth to it in terms of the amount of word choice you have and that sort of thing. And we can also see in the case of Ottoman that not only was Ottoman promoted, but that was also kind of at the expense of Persian. Persian was kind of written out of the story in some ways, not permanently. And I should also say that the Persian scholars that come to the Ottoman Empire were still respected, even well after the 15th and beginning of the 16th century. Like one of them is named Idris Bitlisi, very important, and he's widely copied and regarded as a sort of monument of Ottoman, writes a chronicle of the Ottoman dynasty in Persian, the Eight Paradises. But anyway, that is, an interesting development. And we can see if we compare, the Safavids in Iran and the Mughal dynasty in India, how a different course was possible. So in Iran, the Safavid dynasty is Turkic. The military is Azeri speaking, or I guess maybe pre-modern Azeri, but Turkish speaking. But the language of administration is Persian, even though they use Turkish to communicate with the Ottomans. And it is used, but not as a kind of dominant language. And the same can be said about the Mughals in India. Babur, who I love to mention in videos, writes his memoirs in Turkic, in Chagatai, but that never really becomes a dominant literary language in the Mughal Empire for a variety of reasons. But with the kind of contingencies of history, that maybe they could have used Turkic in the Mughal Empire potentially, but Persian, it just like with Iran, becomes the dominant language in the Mughal case. But the Ottomans chart their own path, and there's a lot more I could discuss with Ottomans. So this is definitely by no means the last video about the Ottoman Turkish language on the channel, but I hope this was at least an interesting introduction, and hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.